Hello and welcome to the Bellingham Real Estate Podcast. I am Paul Balzotti. I'm here with Will Potts. Welcome, Will.
Thank you, Paul.
And this is our first podcast in the new office, in the new studio. So thank you for being the first guest in here. I'm excited about the new spot.
Yeah.
And today we're going to talk about VA loans and resources, local resources for active military and veterans. And obviously, I'm having you in because you are a veteran. So talk to us about, Will, you've been a realtor now for what, 6, 7, 8 years?
9 years.
9 years? Oh, my God. 9 times flying, man.
It's about 9 years and a month.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That sounds very specific, not about the 9 years anyway.
Well, I was licensed at the end of September of 15, so a little over 9 years.
All right. So 9 years. Take us back, military vet. Talk about your service.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. So it was sometime in the 80s. Top Gun was out. My dad was in the Air Force, and then he was flying commercial. I thought, well, that'd be a cool thing to do. I had model airplanes hanging from the ceiling, all kinds, and reading books about that, and Top Gun, and The Right Stuff was out before that. That's another great flying movie. I thought this would be a cool thing to do, right? So I went to apply to some service academies, didn't get in that way. I went to Georgia Tech, graduated. So, now I got to start working for real. And I thought, well, let me go back and look at the military, because I had always considered that and I appreciated that. And my dad, my grandparent, my grandfather, his brother they were both in World War II. So there's a bit of military tradition there. And I thought, well, this would be fun. This would be a thing to do. And I thought, well, okay, so how do I get in? So I enlisted in the Navy, and then I applied for Officer Candidate School and got in that way in February of 95. So I went off to OCS down in Pensacola, Florida, much like the movie, not filmed up in Port Townsend was where it was filmed, but this is Pensacola, Florida.
For Top Gun. Or you're saying where Top Gun was filmed?
Well, so the OCS movie,
OCS,
An Officer and a Gentleman.
Oh, Officer and a Gentleman. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that was filmed, I think it's Fort Worden, which is just north of Port Townsend. The outdoor scenes were filmed there. A lot of that was filmed there. But that's much different, obviously, than Pensacola, Florida. Yeah. So I went to OCS there. It used to be called AOCS, which is aviation. They opened that up to all, not just aviation, but ships, submarines, and other officer programs. So through that, went to flight school, and that's what brought me up here, was just kind of a, I wouldn't say stroke of luck, but when you're in flight school, you get to pick. It's like, well, I'd like to fly at that time, it doesn't fly in the Navy anymore, was F-14, which was in Top Gun. Which was, and also a lot less well-known airplane was the EA-6, was the Prowler, which is what I flew eventually as a flight officer. And there's some other airplanes, and you get toward the end of flight school, and it's like, well, you fill out your wish list, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the Navy, much like the rest of the time in your career in the military, they decide what you're going to do. So I said, well, I'll fill this out, and I thought, you know what? I've never been to the Northwest. I think the furthest west at that time was I went skiing in Colorado. So I thought, I was looking at the map, it's like, well, that'd be cool to go up there, Washington State, right? So I said, well, to do that, I need to fly the Prowler. So, well, that'd be cool. And that was for my community, that was a more attractive thing to do. So I filled that out, and I got lucky, got that. And so that brought me up here February of 97.
To Oak Harbor.
Yeah.
Okay.
The train to fly the Prowler, which took about a year. Then after that, I left to go live in Japan for 3 years. This is my first tour, operational tour. And then from there, I went all over the world, literally back to Pensacola, back to Oak Harbor Station as well. That's where all the Prowlers are stationed. Now the Growler, the EA-18G, the new plane, the new Super Hornet variant. So I flew that. I didn't fly the new one, but flew basically up until about 2011 or so, and then desk jobs until about 2015, and retired.
Well, let's back up here though.
Yeah.
So you went to Iraq, right?
Yes.
So was that, and that was active in the middle of the Second Iraq War, right?
Yes, so the first time was 98 and 99. Two deployments at that time was enforcing the no-fly zone. So it was from the carrier and the...
So that's dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the Arabian Gulf, shot at a few times, but not real risk of being shot down.
See, well, before you even said you were shot at, just the idea of flying over there during that time, I was already scared listening to you talk about that. That's how like.
Well, I did remember some of those flights. I forget the parallel, but the line where Iraq was not allowed to fly south of, that was Operation Southern Watch, and then there was another line north, Operation Northern Watch up toward Turkey. So Iraq was constrained and not allowed to fly in those zones.
So you have to you're one of them.
So we were patrolling that.
Yeah.
But at that time, they had active surface-to-air missile sites, AAA, and there was ROE involved, and we're just flying to basically provide a presence.
Yeah.
And not really combat ops in the sense that we're dropping weapons, and that would come later. But I think it flared up a time or two. I do remember, I think it was later in 98 that they did some strikes because Saddam was violating the no-fly zones, and it was a retaliatory, we're going to take out this site and this radar site. So, and some of those flights were interesting, but yeah.
Wow. Yeah, let me ask you one more thing on that, and then I want to move along to, I mean, this is really a super cool career. And I'm going to say at the end, but I'm going to say again, thank you for your service. I mean, that's still, that's brave work. And so did you ever, when you were flying, either practicing or in active duty, did you ever almost crash or have anything like a flight or an airplane communication error, something that went wrong where you almost crashed or anything like that?
There were times, because you're close to the edge literally a lot, that you don't necessarily realize how close you are. And some of those flights, yes, I never had, I've had friends that have ejected. I've had friends that have died in plane crashes, certainly. And so, but for me personally, it was some emergencies, but nothing where I thought, man, I gotta tighten my lap belt because I'm going to be riding this seat out.
Yeah.
There was never really any, it's like, a couple of times maybe I thought, well, I might need this. I hope the ejection seat works today.
Yeah.
Right? Because I might have to use it. But there were never really any instances where I thought my life was at risk. But there might have been because looking back, I know some scenarios and some instances were
quite dangerous.
Yeah. That could have gone easily the other way.
Right.
But you're in the moment and you're so focused on the mission and what you're doing, you don't realize until later. And so you're lying in your rack at night, trying to go to sleep, and your mind's just racing. And conversely, more maybe scared of things then than when I was actually in the flight.
Right. When you're on the ground, just in these combat zones.
It's like, what could have happened there? So,
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, you had mentioned once that you had been to Iraq to me, but I didn't know that you had gone several times the way you had. So, I mean.
So that was the first time, and we could talk for hours, but the quick summary is we flew back the second time. So the first two times was Southern Watch, 98, 99. The third time was with the second Gulf War. Had started, I think it was 03. And so I had been stationed during that start in Bahrain as a desk duty for a year, staff officer tour. Then when I went back to flying, we went back to be stationed in Western Iraq at a former MiG-25 base that the Iraqis had used, but then we took over when the second Gulf War started. So we were flying missions from that base in Western Iraq to support. At that time, it was a counter IED, the roadside bombs. And so our platform would provide the electronic jamming to prevent or mitigate the cell phones, the washing machine timers, anything electronic that could trigger a roadside bomb as a convoy would go by.
Wow. Oh, yeah, that was definitely a thing.
it was a big thing. And so we would just fly missions at daytime, night. You could follow the convoy. We would follow them at night, easy to see at night with all the headlights along the road, and provide that electronic jamming, which would minimize. You still might have some bombs that would detonate just by a manual trigger, but we would try to prevent the ones electronic.
So in summary there, you were saving lives, literally, with that mission, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Wow. So, okay. So let's fast forward. Amazing service there. And you then are at Oak Harbor. You settle here. Let's start talking about VA loans. How do you use your VA loan? Because you settled it. You're in Mount Vernon now, right? And,
Yes.
So you clearly have used your VA loan. You've helped clients use your VA loan. How have you used kind of the VA loan, and what are some things about the VA loan that are not necessarily widely known?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Paul. So it's the VA loan. When I first got mine, was the first house I bought was in Florida. When I went back to Pensacola, 2001, used the VA loan. I probably knew next to nothing about the VA loan other than it was called a VA loan, and there was no money down required.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? I did not know. I mean, completely clueless. So that's why I would say fast forward a bit, is that when you go to get a loan, whether a VA loan or a conventional loan, you really need to know that the mortgage broker or the bank you're working with knows what a VA loan is, because there's a lot of intricacies and details, and we'll talk about some of those, but they can be very important. So, but at that time, I had my VA loan in Florida, sold the house, moved up here. When I bought my second house, the one I'm living in now, I didn't use a VA loan. This was back, if you remember, in the days of 04, 05, 06, when loans were flying off the shelf, right? So I had I think he called it 85-15-5 loan, first and a second 5% down. So we can't really get those now, right?
Yeah.
So I couldn't use the VA loan because of the price point of the house.
Oh, with the VA loan limits have gone up a lot since then. Yeah.
Well, they disappeared.
That's right. There is no loan limit.
There's no more loan limit.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's one main benefit now. There's no more VA loan limit. So you can get a loan for whatever you can qualify for.
Which is amazing.
Whatever the lender will give you. But I did refi that house some years later, actually about 3 years ago, with a VA refinance.
Good.
So not only can you buy a house, you can refinance your house. If you have a current VA loan and you want to refi, the process is really straightforward.
Yeah.
And quite simple. So having gone through, and I have that loan in force now, the refinance, at about 3%.
Wow.
So it's great. So what makes a VA loan attractive? It's probably the best loan that you can get on the market.
Yeah.
As a veteran, compared to any other loan out there, really. Not maybe in every single circumstance, but in
close.
Almost all of them. And so what is a VA loan? It's a non-conventional loan. It's a non-conforming. And why do you call it that? Because it's backed by the government.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be Ginnie Mae provides the backing. A VA loan guarantees up to 25% of the loan amount. So who loans the money? Any other bank that you work with, Chase, major banks, local banks, WaFed, they make the loan, but the VA backs the loan. The VA doesn't provide the money. So that's what it is. And so what makes it attractive? But back up just a bit. How do you qualify? Well, you have to be, obviously, a veteran. If you're on active duty for 90 days or more, you qualify. If you're a reservist with active duty of 90 days, if not that, if you're just a straight reservist, then it might take a couple of years, but there's requirements for that, and that's why I say you got to talk to a loan officer that knows the VA, and that you can get what they call a certificate of eligibility.
Yeah.
And it's important to have that because you can't be pre-approved until you have that. Basically, okay, this person qualifies, and now we can look at the debt to income and that kind of stuff that qualify. So once you're qualified, and what makes it attractive? Well, we've talked about there's no loan limit. It's whatever the bank will qualify you for. What they look at your debt to income and decide, okay, we can give you this much money.
Yep.
In addition to that, the qualifying standards are generally a little bit easier. Credit scores, some lenders all the way to as low as 500. So the process to qualify and the credit requirements, the debt to income ratios can be a little bit higher. So it's in general easier to qualify. Less money to no money down. You can put some money down, but it can't be a 0% down payment loan. And then all you really have are your VA funding fee and your normal closing costs.
But you still have, the rates are still lower.
Yeah.
They're lower. They're significantly lower right now than conventional.
Rates are almost always, every time you look, maybe a half, maybe 1% lower, somewhere in that range. And why is that? Because the government's guaranteeing basically 25% up to of the loan. So that's kind of, and that leads me to the next benefit is because they're guaranteeing up to 25% of the loan amount, there's no PMI.
Yeah.
And so
private mortgage insurance, which can add to your monthly.
Right. So if you have a $500,000 loan, that might be a 1% a year, which could be $5,000, and that's about $400 a month of PMI that you don't have. Now, some would say, well, conventional loan, you don't have a funding fee, but you're paying a higher rate. So the funding fee is kind of a paying points, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same difference. And then can you use VA for investment property?
Yes. So you can use them. You can use a VA loan for pretty much everything except a co-op and vacant land. So a condo, manufactured, modular home, and multifamily if you're living in one of the units and renting out the others. And so that rental income can help you qualify. Another thing that's not well known either is that you can have more than one VA loan at the same time. So how does that work? We've talked a little bit about the 25% guaranteed loan limit the VA provides. That's what's also can be referred to as the VA entitlement. So let's say when I left Pensacola, I didn't sell my house, but I hadn't used my full VA entitlement because maybe I put some money down, or maybe the loan amount wasn't that high in relation to the conforming loan limits for the county that I was in. So when I moved up here, I had some entitlement left so I could use a VA loan.
So you can keep that as a rental if you wanted or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't, once I've maxed out my entitlement, I can't get another loan.
Right.
So I either have to sell the house and pay off the loan I have, and then I can go get another VA loan.
Yeah.
So I can keep using the VA loan basically forever.
That's fantastic.
So, and another good thing to talk about the funding fee is if you have, and this is important because I didn't know it when I left the service, is that when you have a disability rating of 10% or more, there's no VA funding fee.
Wow.
So we're talking 2%, 2.15% up to 3.3%.
And the disability probably, if you PTSD, those kind of things probably is part of that.
For a 10%, and you can look at your hearing loss, which for me, had I thought ahead a minute, it's like, well, I might refi, so I don't want to pay my funding fee. Maybe I should have my hearing looked at a little more closely.
Yeah. Because
the 10% disability rating is not that.
That doesn't seem like that much. Yeah.
Right.
If you have some hearing loss, then that could be 10%.
There's so many issues out there when you go through your final health physical and talking about that and going to a doctor and say, well, you have legitimate issues.
Yeah. Well, that's the last thing I want to cover is, so in Whatcom and Skagit County.
Yeah.
What are the main, what are some of the bigger resources available for obviously with Oak Harbor, Edmonds, you have these nearby bases, right? So I'd imagine there's good resources here.
Right. So kind of the big picture you have in Seattle, the regional veteran center that has the VA hospital and all that goes with that. Because we have so many veterans and bases from Kitsap to Everett to Oak Harbor, I don't know the number, but it's in the tens of thousands of veterans on active duty. not counting the retired veterans.
And Navy by far the biggest then.
Navy,
Washington State.
There's also Joint Base Lewis McChord, which has the Army side, Air Force as well at near Tacoma. So there's a huge active duty presence. In addition to, that's why a lot of retirees are in this area. So Seattle is kind of the hub. Mount Vernon has a veteran health center and other associated benefits for counseling. And there's a vet center in Bellingham as well that provides counseling, PTSD, and other things. So the resources out there.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, we've covered a lot. It was really cool to hear more about your history, and certainly if you know somebody who's in active military or a veteran, or you are yourself, hopefully, even if you're not in the area, but you're just looking for, resources or real estate questions. You had mentioned also it's important if you are a veteran to go to va.gov, and there's tons of resources there too, right?
There's so many things you just don't know. Even when I was on active duty, I may have known 5% of things that are available.
Yeah.
And when I retired, I felt relatively fine and healthy and normal, right? After 20 years of flying. But as my wife said, maybe your hearing's not as good as you think it is. So there's things you might want to check a little further before you get separated and out of the service, and it gets a little more difficult.
Yeah.
So it's just a lot of things that I didn't know about. But definitely go to va.gov, ask myself, ask other veterans, just ask around, ask a lot of questions. Say, oh, I had no idea that existed. That program was out there. So
and hopefully they can get into home ownership if they're not into home ownership, and with that VA loan. And so thank you for your service, my man. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you for listening or watching. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Paul.